Mr Chair, I do want to bring this debate back to part one of this bill because I feel that it has strayed somewhat, and I particularly want to talk about victims because the other side of the House seem to think that this side of the House hadn't thought about the victims. Well, can I tell you, Mr Chair, that this side of the House cares deeply for the victims, and that's why we are opposing this bill. Because I want to tell you, Mr Chair, I want to tell the House, I want to tell listeners about a true story of someone who's affected by Part 10 of this bill, the very unfeeling Part 10 of Clause 10 of Part 1 of this bill. Yes, I'll name the victim. I think he's known to David Bennett because I think he's visited David Bennett and been told that he'll get no help and support whatsoever. His name's Bruce Gardner. And Bruce Gardner is from Hamilton. And the story, and I hope the other side of the House will I hope they'll give the story the respect it deserves because it's not a very pretty story. Bruce Gardner was a milk tanker driver. And he was setting about doing his job one day, just any other day started out for him. But quite quickly it changed his life forever because what in fact occurred was that a young man, a very young man, ran out in front of his milk tanker to take his own life in order to commit suicide. And not only has Bruce Gardner suffered already at the hands of this government because the mental injury that he suffered as a result of the trauma associated with that accident has already been taken away by this uncaring government. It's already been taken away by this uncaring government. But, yes, so David Bennett's about to tell the Minister that when the Labor government passed the bill, that Bruce Gardner had already suffered his mental injury. But Bruce Gardner had enough guts, had enough courage to actually campaign for others who faced his situation because he wanted to make sure that no one else faced the living hell that he had faced because he did not get any compensation for the mental injury that he suffered as a result of being involved in that unfortunate incident. And David Bennett doesn't care because he thinks that's fine. He thinks it's absolutely fine that not only did Bruce Gardner not get that compensation at the time, but no Bruce Gardners in the future should ever have that compensation. And his government made sure of that and made sure that people with getting mental injury through work accidents could not get compensation. So that's one part of the story. But the second part of the story is, and the Labor government did change the law to recognise mental injury suffered through work accidents, and so the member is quite wrong. But the part of the story that really brings us to this bill is that now Bruce Gardner, the young man who caused that issue, the young man who committed suicide, his family will no longer be able to get compensation under this Act. And Bruce Gardner has told me how horrified he is about that because after that event changed his life forever, he in fact became very, very involved with the family of that young man because imagine that situation where that had occurred and he had to go and tell the family because it happened outside the family property. He had to go and tell that family, Clause 10, and I think David Bennett should actually read the bill, because now that family would not get compensation for that. Yes, they can. Yes, they can. And I think that absolutely shows the lack of understanding. And so the compensation that they use to actually pay for funeral expenses, no longer available. No longer available under this Act. And I really do think the Minister should educate his own caucus about this because they do not seem to understand what they're about to vote for. They do not seem to understand that they are about to take that compensation away from those families who are already suffering, who through no fault of their own are paying funeral expenses that are covered now, Mr Bennett, will not be covered because of your vote on this bill and because of this clause They will no longer be covered.
I call Dr. Paul Hutchison.